Getting your first client can be really, really daunting. You're not sure what to do, what to even sell. You're still figuring out your brand, your offer, where you should sell. So today I'm going to walk through how I got my first ever client, as well as how I got my first client on Etsy, Pinterest, Instagram, my website, from planner referrals, and Google SEO. And I'll tell you exactly what I did to get my first client on every single one of those platforms. My first ever client was on Etsy, and I listed a custom watercolor portrait. You can see here, this is the original listing photo, and I've actually never updated it. I've, created new listings for variations of this product, and I have different photos. But since this one was doing so well and it still sells today and does really well, I've kept it the same. I haven't touched it. What makes this unique and a reason why I think it sells so well and why it sold right away is that I actually paint the portrait on handmade paper. And I emphasize that in the listing that this is 100% cotton paper. I even talk about how it's perfect for a cotton anniversary or perfect for a paper anniversary, which are the first two anniversaries for weddings. And that really gets people interested in the listing itself because it's something that's really tangible, especially in our AI world that we're in right now. Creating something on a material that AI can't duplicate is a surefire way to differentiate yourself from AI and create value in a way that clients will want to pay for it. So this was my first ever client. I started out just doing Etsy portraits on the side of my day job. And then I started listing other things on handmade paper. That's what I was known for. That's kind of how I carved out and started within Etsy, started my brand as I really honed in on handmade paper and I honed in on watercolor. And so I listed my first wedding invitations in about 2020, 2021. And again, they started selling right away. I was selling them for, I think, $500 at the time. So not cheap at all. There were lots of other cheaper sellers. And the reason why I was able to do that is because, again, I'm communicating value. I was able to talk about how they would keep the original painting afterwards, which people really like as a keepsake. They can frame it, they can tuck it into a wedding album. So people really love that aspect of it and the fact that they're going to get it. People also really love purchasing from within their own country. So a lot of the cheaper sellers you'll notice are, from other countries, Asia or Europe. And so if you're selling primarily to a US audience, having a US based business does matter and does make a difference in terms of sales. This sold right away, so I didn't have necessarily any sort of special Etsy trick over the years. I've developed a system for Etsy that I use in order to break through on certain keywords. But really, because I was already breaking through on handmade paper and watercolor keywords, I was then able to start breaking through on watercolor wedding invitations with this listing. And even though this doesn't seem like much, this is a pretty bare bones basic photo. I shot this in my apartment in Queens on my iPhone at the time. It um actually was picked up by brides and it still gets a lot of traffic today because it's on a brides.com list of where to find wedding invitations that they just update every year, and they've kept this product within that. Again, because it's different, because it's just got that slight twist of being on handmade paper, of having a certain look, more rustic look that was especially popular in 2017 through maybe 2020. It's become less popular now to have a rustic wedding. Everybody wants elegant and timeless. I've even heard rustic botanical as a sort of twist on that. But just that small twist of adding the handmade paper and printing it on handmade paper really does make a difference and helps you stand out. So that's something you should definitely think about when you're launching on any new platform or you're developing your product or service offering. How can you stand out? How can you have ownership as a brand over a certain thing? My brand in particular has a lot of ownership over watercolor, and a lot of ownership over handmade paper and watercolor paper in general. So every product that I launch has to have one of those things. That's how I'm able to eliminate a lot of the fluff and hone in and focus. Is any product that I launch, it has to relate back to the fine art quality of my brand and that premiumness of, that's not a word, but the premium nature of my business. I even named it Cotton and Bow, right? Because usually all of my products are on cotton handmade paper, or they have a bow, or they have some sort of original watercolor element, whether it's something I've pre-painted or whether it's something that's being commissioned for the client at the moment. When I got on Pinterest, my first Pinterest client actually came from other clients that I had gotten on Etsy. So because I started on Etsy and I really focused in there, I didn't move to another platform until I was making over 100K on Etsy alone. I then started to experiment with other platforms and driving additional traffic to my Etsy page and launching a website and that sort of thing. So that's a really important point. I'm going to go through a lot of platforms today, but if you haven't made 100K per year on any given platform, what you really need to do is hone in and focus on one platform at a time. So I'm going to go through a number of those different platforms and ways to drive traffic and ways to get sales. I want you to focus on just one of them that makes sense for you and that makes sense for whoever your customer is that you're targeting until you've hit 100K on that platform. Otherwise, don't move to additional platforms after that. This client came from I had sold a client on Etsy who did these lovely menus with a watercolor on the bottom. And she had also done a custom welcome booklet that was printed on handmade paper that had her portrait with her husband in the mountains where they were getting married, and a nice welcome letter and some other illustrations on it. And so I posted this on to Pinterest to drive additional traffic to my Etsy shop at the time. And I actually got featured in Style Me Pretty for this particular wedding. And Style Me Pretty also added it on Pinterest. And that's when I started getting inquiries for this specific one and sold my first client that I attribute to Pinterest, which was a custom wedding invitation client. And these were the actual invitations that we created. You can see very, very different, very luxe in terms of custom die cut. I believe this was a $4,000 or $5,000 custom invitation client, so very high value client in the stationery world, when our averages tend to be more like 1,500 across the board. This is on the higher end. And the reason why she loved this work and wanted to work with me and saw it on Pinterest is because she was getting married in the same place. So this was listed as Patek Ranch. It has a custom illustration of Patek Ranch, and I'm definitely saying that wrong. Sorry, my Colorado folks. And she was searching for Patek Ranch wedding inspiration, and she found my website, she found my Etsy page, and she reached out to me to start the custom consultation process. So that's how I was able to get my first client on Pinterest, who was also getting married at Patek Ranch. My first client on Instagram, I actually can't remember. This is definitely not the first client I received on Instagram. If I go way back, there are definitely others that I received and leads that I received. But what I did to get my first clients on Instagram is just post photos of the work and target very specific keywords for it. And I also would do reels of the work. So that sounds very basic, but that's really all you have to do to get found on Instagram by your ideal client is show pictures of the work. If you haven't created the work yet for a client, create some creative projects, personal projects for your brand that showcase the kind of work that you want to achieve. The reason I'm showing this post in particular is because I know directly this one post, which is a carousel, so static photos, generated two different clients for me from different planners and over $3,000 in revenue just from this one Instagram post. I had kind of a cutesy caption. Sorry, I can't come to the phone right now. I'm too busy making beautiful things for spring and summer weddings, like these custom wedding itineraries for a wedding weekend in Hawaii, featuring two original maps, the couple's favorite spots, and the resort highlights. Aloha. And then I did include some hashtags, watercolor wedding, watercolor map, custom map. You can see again, I'm really honing in on the keywords that work for my brand and what makes my brand stand out among the crowd of wedding stationers and illustrators overall. Is again, I'm focusing on watercolor wedding pieces. I've really honed in on watercolor and wedding. I also included and tagged the resort that's featured in the work. It's a multi-page booklet with ribbon. It has a map on it. It had the weekend itinerary. It had a map of Hawaii on the back. It's a beautiful piece, and I've had many clients reach out to me since to recreate this for their wedding, whether they're also getting married in Hawaii or Kona Village, or they're getting married somewhere else. We've created these itinerary booklets for them. And you can see even on the post, one of the planners that reached out to me, and we ended up working together to create something very similar for her client who was getting married in Hawaii. One of the things that's important to know about clients overall, generally, is they don't have a lot of imagination. If they see something that they like, they want that thing. If you're not creating any sort of work that looks like the work that they want, they don't reach out to you. They assume you can't create it, even though I obviously could do this on different paper types, or I could do it with different colored ribbon, or I could do it for different locations. If clients don't see the vision that they have for the product displayed somewhere in your portfolio or on Instagram or anywhere else that you sell your work, they're not gonna have the imagination to think that it's possible with you. They're only gonna see what they relate to, and that's what's going to trigger them to reach out to you to get something similar. Next, let's talk about Google and SEO. For Google and SEO, one of the things that works really well is writing blog posts. I think that's a pretty basic piece of information. Lots of people tell you to write blog posts. I think what's missing is the fact that you have to write so many blog posts. You should be writing, 50 to 100 if you really want to start getting picked up by Google and found by clients. And you should be writing things, especially now, that don't answer a specific question that AI can just answer for them. You want to be focusing on more visual topics. You want to be focusing on curated things that AI can't really answer. At the time, AI wasn't as much of a big deal. So the post that attracted a lot of clients and a lot of inquiries for me was wedding invitation trends. And so I did a number of variations on that as well, wedding decor trends. And of course, I slotted in which products fit of mine within the different trends. If I didn't have something that fit with a trend, I, would showcase a different stationer's product, but and credit them obviously. But for the most part, I was able to tie a lot of my products back to wedding invitation trends. And I've created this article over and over again. I pinned it to Pinterest. Pinterest and SEO really work hand in hand. And I was able to get a lot of inquiries and wedding bookings from this post. It doesn't perform as well now because of AI. This is a topic that if you searched wedding invitation trends for 2026, for 2027, AI is going to summarize and give you that answer right away, and then you might click into the individual pieces to see more photos, but it's not something that people are going to read as much in depth anymore. When AI is sort of taking that initial search away, it still gets good traffic. It just doesn't get the same amount of traffic as it did before. And what you really want to focus on instead is topics that are highly visual. So things like targeting different venues and your reviews of those different venues, your products that you've created that feature those different venues or locations, those sorts of things tend to do a lot better in SEO because AI can't replicate them as well and isn't giving them the visual answers that they need. The last thing I'm going to talk about is planners and how I got my first client through wedding planners. I have had planners find me just like you saw in that Instagram post before. I've had planners find me through my work with Minted. I've had planners find me through my work on Etsy. Etsy is really big for a certain type of planner. They think artists, they think Etsy, and so they'll go to Etsy and search for it, and then that's how we've started working together. I find that those sorts of wedding planner relationships aren't as fruitful and aren't as deep, and they're not as reoccurring as the relationships that I've sought after and built myself. So, one of the things I did when I started to reach out to planners and I wanted to work more with planners and get some recurring revenue and recurring referrals from planners was I built a list of over 200 planners with their names, their contact email, their phone number, their address, if I could find it, their website, their Instagram handle, and I started systematically reaching out to them one by one. The way that I found these addresses was I started first with the knot. I didn't love the results I was getting in my area, and I was finding that a lot of the listings there were no longer active. I would click through their website and they didn't exist anymore, but they had listed themselves in the knot years and years ago. What I actually found more helpful was going through the member directories of organizations that I was a part of and finding all the planners in my geographic area that made sense for my business and collecting the information that way. So things like WIPA, Society Privé, I went through those directories and compiled my list that way. I followed them all on Instagram before I ever reached out to them, started engaging with their content. So it wasn't a total cold outreach when I first emailed them. It was more of a warm outreach. They had already recognized me and recognized my work and saw the types of things that I was doing. And the other important thing that I did when I reached out to them was I used their first name if I had it. If I didn't have it, I would say team XYZ Co. or whatever their name was. And I included how my brand fit their brand. So I talked about the types of clients that we target together and what makes my business different. I also added value to that email. So I added things like a checklist or a timeline that they could pass off to their couples. It was lightly branded, but it wasn't overly branded so that they could feel comfortable passing that along to their clients or they could use it themselves as far as planning goes. And I introduced myself that way. Where people go wrong is they either don't do the engagement first, so they don't follow them on Instagram, they don't follow them on other social media platforms, TikTok, what have you. They don't interact with them before they reach out, or they don't talk about the connection that they have with them in that email and make it really personalized. So any contact that I got from WIPA, I said, hey, we're in WIPA together. Any contact that I had gotten from Societe Privée, hey, we're in Societe Privée together. I acknowledged how we knew each other and how we were connected to each other. I talked about what made our brands cohesive together. If I found someone who talked about bright and playful and fun weddings, I said, my brand is also bright, playful, fun. So I think we have a lot of client aesthetics in common. Or if they talked about not being cookie cutter is on my website. That's something that I talk about a lot to my clients and something that resonates with my clients really well. And so I would mention, hey, we both talk to non cookie cutter couples. And then, like I said, I would add that little bit of value to them so that I was giving back in our first interaction and wasn't just taking from them and wasn't just asking for referrals. I also talked about what I specialize in and what makes Cotton and Bow unique. The fact that I specialize in watercolor, handmade paper, and then I listed a couple of other things that they can't really get elsewhere. I specifically tried to target things that you couldn't get on Minted. A lot of planners use Minted because they get an affiliate commission. So they love recommending Minted, and usually couples can find whatever they want there if they're on a lower budget. But there are things that Minted doesn't do. Minted doesn't do handmade paper, for example. Minted does custom invitations and custom watercolor, but people don't know that Minted does that. That's not the first thing they think about with Minted. So I talk about that. And same thing, right, with Zazzle or AI or all of these other platforms. Find what makes your brand unique that other companies can't replicate. This goes for photography, planners, venues, DJs, anything that you do in the wedding industry, even as an artist or an interior designer outside of the wedding industry. What you want to do is really hone in on what makes your brand unique. I'm actually going to be launching a marketing strategy in August that talks all about how to find what makes your brand unique and stand out in what's a very crowded marketplace these days, especially for weddings. And so I'm going to be launching that in August 1st. Stay tuned for more information on that. But if you're having trouble deciding what sets your brand apart from other people and how to differentiate your brand from AI in particular and add value there, that strategy is really going to help you.